Do you mind actually just doing a clap like that?
Sure.
Can you tell me about your first gig in the industry? Where did you work?
My first gig was at a studio called Page 44. They're no longer around. And I started as a character artist. So I was in there making characters and textures and rigging and doing all the things it took to get characters in the game.
Was your goal always to work in games, or did you?
No, actually my goal is to work in film. So I saw Toy Story when I was just graduating from high school, and I was like, I don't know what that is, but I want to do that. So I went to school for computer animation, and I moved to California thinking I was going to work at Pixar, because everyone thinks that. And I got my first job in games, and I just got addicted to it. My first project was Freakstyle for EA. EA was a client of ours, so I got to work on that.
EA big.
EA big.
Yeah.
So after EA, I was working at Page 44 for EA, and I was like, well, why am I cut out the middleman and go straight for the money? So I went to EA, and I was a character artist there for 5 years. And then while I was there, I worked on Tiger Woods for 2 years.
Right.
Then I worked on the Simpsons game. I was on Godfather for a little bit, and then I worked on Dante's Inferno.
Did you make character art for famous golfers then?
Yes, I did. There's a lot of politics that go on with what you can put on the character. So I worked a little bit on Tiger. I worked on BJ Singh, who's a really well-known golfer. John Daly's face I also worked on. So I touched a little bit of things.
Do they have to give clearance for their likeness?
Yes, they have to give clearance, and then you have to get clearance for all of their clothing because they're sponsored.
Wow.
And then you have to pay for actually putting the clothing in the game, which is surprising.
It's a bit of a shift then from doing that to working on Simpsons
Yes.
characters.
Yes and no, because you still have to deal with licenses and intellectual property holders, but Simpsons, of course, is different aesthetic and different rules.
So throughout this period, were you mostly doing was it character art?
Yes. I think it was what I was initially interested in, and then once I got into the industry, I just was extremely curious. So I learned rigging, and then from rigging I learned how to do lighting and environments, and then I learned visual effects, and at some point you kind of know how to do all the things in the pipeline, and that leads to being a lead and an art director. Actually, I left EA to take on a lead role at a small studio called Backbone Entertainment. And I came on to work on a project called Zombie Apocalypse. So it was a little zombie shooter for XBLA, and then shortly after that project we landed a co-development deal with Harmonix, so I worked on Dance Central 3 there. I think one of the great things about working at EA was that I got to do on various range of projects, and you would kind of get shuffled between them, but I do think a lot of artists end up getting their portfolio defines what they get hired for in the future, and very rarely do they get to swing as widely, I think, as I have. So when I first started on Tiger, we were a team of 10 character artists, and then by the time I got to Dante's Inferno, it was my lead and myself as a senior artist, and everything else was starting to get outsourced. So learning how to direct teams across continents was a new skill for me.
Yeah, EA probably would have been one of the first studios to have that sort of outsourced manager role, right?
Yes, they were. They sort of took on the mantle of distributed development.
Is that something that you have currently with your role at Double Fine as well?
Yeah, that outsourcing is definitely not going away. So at pretty much every project I have, we have external studio partners that I have to also manage. Outsourcing is when you essentially hire an external team of artists to help co-develop with you. So your team sort of helps set the direction of what the next set of artists are going to do, but you still have to manage the process by which art is being made. It's a lot of communication and check-ins and gates on how and when you check in on art and make sure that it's going in the right direction. It's the same process as you have with an internal team. It's just compounded by language barriers and time differences and not being in the same place, and that communication challenges that come along with that.
And it's kind of a byproduct of the financial realities, right, of having to make games with so much content, I guess?
It's mostly fidelity.
Okay.
So when you think about the graphics that came from the PS2 to where we're going now with 4K gaming and beyond, this exponentially, the same asset now went from 1 or 2 maps to 6 or 7 maps. And that content development and that increase in information that needs to be there visually is where those costs are coming from. Double Fine is its own unique beast. I would say Double Fine gets to have a small team because their team is extremely talented and they can punch above their weight. So for Double Fine, we have a team of 20 artists. At a studio like EA, currently our team would be 150 people. But because Double Fine does what Double Fine does, and they have their own unique properties and IPs, we are able to keep a small team and rely more on outsourcing. So for us, we have a healthy quantity of concept artists, which is really great because they sort of set the vision for everything else that's going to be made. And then we have a really strong team of environment artists as well that help build our worlds, and some strong character artists as well. So out of the 20 people, we're doing the work of what big studios will be doing. And there are challenges that come with that, but because the team is so talented and they're very picky about who they hire, I'm really lucky.
Can you give us like an idea of the different stages, I guess, that an art team has on a development cycle?
Well, the first phase is pre-production, and that's kind of where you are all huddled around trying to figure out what you're making. And that's usually the part people love the most. It's like you get to do the pie in the sky dreaming. So you're figuring out who your characters are, what their backstories are, what worlds we want to go to, what they could look like, what visual effects looks like. You're doing a lot of look development there, doing a vertical slice is the term everybody loves to use. Just try to get a direction where the rest of the project could go. And then you get into production, and that's when you're working with your design team and they're making white boxes for gameplay, and then it's the artist's job to take that white box and flesh out the world. Or, Tim goes off and writes script, and then we know what the character looks like, so we have to build it, figure out what their facial expressions are. So that's a production. And then there's the end of production where you're doing bug fixing and you're doing a lot of polish work, and that's the part that drives people nuts. It's the most nitpicky part of development, but it's the last 10% is more important, just as important as the 90. Because when a game is buggy and it looks like crap, you feel that. So those are the three big phases, and there's a lot of sub phases between that. Tim is great because he is really the vision holder for the story. And he has really strong instincts of what he likes and what he doesn't like, but he doesn't micromanage or handhold that process. He trusts his artists and he trusts his art team, and he lets them bring ideas to him, and he likes to collaborate in that way, and that's why it's really fun to work with Tim. It's probably one of the most fulfilling projects I've worked on, because when you think of the human mind, no two humans are the same. So we approached the project with the same sort of theory. So this one is really unique, and it's not like any other game I've worked on because every level requires you to do pre-production. Because a different brain has a different look, and they all have their own hang-ups, and how you communicate those hang-ups require you to really think about, okay, I'm in this person's brain, what is their problem and what does this world look like? See, we essentially had to do pre-production over and over 11 times.
Right.
And then you add the hub world and the real world experience where Raz actually exists. And that was a lot of pre-production, it's a lot of look development. We had to find a nice balance between the style of the first game and then the fidelity of current games and where in the world the Psychonauts fit within that. And it also helped that we had the original character artist still on staff. So Dave Russell, everybody calls him Rusty, he was on the first Psychonauts and he's now on the second one. He's been there for 17 years. So he had this tribal brain trust, and he kind of knew, he had an instinct of what he felt like the characters needed to fit into modern times, but not lose the charm of the first game.
What's the most enjoyable part of the work for you?
For me, I just kind of let my team tap into their talent and let them come up with ideas and to see what comes out the other side, and then help them shape things along the way. They continue to inspire me, and I think that's my favorite part. They'll show me some piece of art and I'm like, I wouldn't have thought of that, and I absolutely love it. Or I don't know where we're going with this, but just keep going. There's something here, just keep going. And I think that's really unique about this project, is that this team, you can kind of let them do their own thing and just kind of scooch them that way if they're going a little bit off the rails. I really enjoy it. I've been at big studios and small studios, and for me, the thing that I really enjoy about it is that it feels like a family. I mean, it's 50 people. My team is 20 people. Everyone knows each other. You know, there isn't a whole bunch of red tape you have to go through to get a decision made. If somebody has a really strong idea, they can get buy-in, and we'll quantify like how much, you know, how much time it's going to take, and then we could just run with it. You know, we don't have to go through the loops that everyone else does at a bigger studio.